An Air India aircraft began its takeoff roll at Ahmedabad Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. The captain advanced the throttles to maximum thrust for takeoff. Both engines accelerated the aircraft to takeoff speed, but the captain observed a steady decline in the engine thrust. The subsequent events profoundly impacted the global aviation community. What precisely caused this aircraft's accident? Let's break down the whole story in today's video. June 12, 2025, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport, Ahmedabad, India. The airport has a single runway, measuring 3,505 meters or 11,499 feet in length. Around 1:30 p.m., a Boeing 787 was preparing for takeoff from Gate 43. Air India operated the flight with 230 passengers and 12 crew members, totaling 242 individuals on board. Captain Sumit Sabharwal, the pilot in command, led the flight. Aged 55, he had accumulated over 8,200 hours of flight experience. The first officer, Clive Kunder, aged 32, had 1,100 hours of flight experience. Among the passengers, 169 were Indian, 53 from the UK, 7 from Portugal, and 1 from Canada. This plane was flying from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick Airport. Due to the long-haul flight, the aircraft carried a near maximum fuel load and nearly full passenger capacity. At the airport, a female passenger argued with ground crew after arriving 10-15 minutes late due to traffic. As the aircraft remained at the gate, she insisted on boarding, citing her $700 ticket purchase. Despite her insistence, she was not allowed on. At approximately 13:30, ATC cleared the flight for takeoff. The aircraft had to push back from gate 43, taxi to runway 23, and prepare for takeoff. The pushback went smoothly, but the pilot made a critical mistake. After pushback, the aircraft deviated from the taxi route and proceeded directly onto runway 23, positioned approximately 5,199 feet beyond the runway threshold. Flight 171 began its takeoff roll with 6,300 feet of runway remaining. The captain applied maximum thrust, and the aircraft accelerated along the runway. The aircraft lifted off and climbed 400 to 500 feet, but then a critical issue occurred. Instead of maintaining the climb, the aircraft unexpectedly began to descend. No one knew why or how. 30 seconds after the takeoff, the aircraft collided with the roof of BJ Medical College. The aircraft's tail section broke and became lodged in the impact site. The remainder of the aircraft impacted and damaged nearby residential structures. Due to the full fuel tanks, a massive fireball erupted, spreading flames across the surrounding area. Dense black smoke was visible from several kilometers away. People nearby captured the entire tragedy on their camera. Viewing the footage was deeply unsettling. The images of individuals affected by the fire are too distressing to display. More than 300 fire trucks and numerous ambulances responded, with rescue operations continuing for hours amidst audible distress. I often say that fatalities in aviation accidents results not from the impact, but from post-crash fires. And in this fierce fire, people are helpless. Rescuing survivors is nearly impossible during intense post-crash fires. By the time the fire dies down, it's usually too late. Of the 242 individuals on board, only one survived. The sole survivor sustained minor injuries and exited the wreckage independently, a remarkable outcome. Sadly, 241 people died in this disaster. Approximately 50 ground personnel and residents are estimated to have perished, though the exact number remains unconfirmed. This is the first ever crash for Air India's Boeing 787, where the entire plane was destroyed, officially declared a total loss. The aircraft crashed approximately 1,600 meters beyond the runway, impacting a populated area and causing extensive damage. If the plane had crashed between a little earlier, or veered left or right, or even slightly ahead, then the destruction would have been more massive. The death toll could have reached into thousands. Due to the fortunate circumstances of the pilot's swift actions, the aircraft avoided a densely populated area, though it still destroyed nearby residences. The person who survived this accident was sitting in seat number 11A. The survivor reported that during the crash, his seat detached and was displaced from the fire-affected area. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he was still strapped to his seatbelt. He immediately unbuckled it and moved away from the fire before it could reach him, and that's how he survived. He also noted that green and white cabin lights were illuminated before the crash. Maybe those were the exit door lights. In emergencies, these lights turn on and shine brightly to get visible through darkness or smoke. This was happening a few seconds before impact. This indicates a potential electrical failure or malfunction in the aircraft's power supply, causing the cabin lights to flicker. His brother was also on the same plane, but sadly he did not survive. A family of 3 children and their parents were traveling to London. The father was already settled in London. Once he had fully settled, he decided to bring his wife and children over. This was their first flight. The family intended to begin a new chapter in London. Following the flight, the captain flying the plane, Sumit Sabharwal, had promised his father that after this flight, he would soon quit his job to live with and care for him. But this accident shattered all their hopes. Each passenger had a unique personal story. Following the accident, numerous video clips circulated widely online. After reviewing the footage, a comprehensive analysis was conducted. The investigation aims to clarify the sequence of events surrounding the accident. 2 hours before the accident, a passenger named Akash travelled on the same aircraft to Ahmedabad. He observed that the aircraft's air conditioning, cabin lights, and in-flight entertainment screen were malfunctioning. He noted additional anomalies, including a non-functional in-flight entertainment system, inoperative air conditioning, and passengers using magazine to fan themselves. He revealed his tickets too, so people wouldn't think he was lying. However, what exactly was unusual, we don't know. After the accident, the female passenger who argued to board expressed relief that security denied her access, sparing her life. Tata Group announced that the families of all the people who died in the accident would receive around $115,000. The day after the crash, both black boxes of the plane were found. However, one of the black boxes, the flight data recorder, FDR, sustained significant damage. The FDR functions as the aircraft's diagnostic system, recording critical flight parameters. Just like our brain immediately knows if any part of our body is hurt, the flight data recorder also works like this. If there is any problem occurring in any part of the plane, there are high chances that the flight data recorder will record it. So if the flight data recorder is recovered intact, 80% of the case is usually solved. But now things have gotten complicated in AirIndia's case. Hopefully all the data can be extracted. Right now, to repair the flight data recorder, it might be sent to the US. Speaking of the cockpit voice recorder, it records all the audio in the cockpit. The cockpit voice recorder's audio was successfully retrieved. While the audio remains unreleased, initial findings suggest no pilot error during the flight. The pilot attempted to control the aircraft until the final moments, possibly minimizing ground casualties. ADS-B data indicates the aircraft initiated takeoff approximately midway down the runway. There were about 6,300 feet of runway left to take off. After a shortened takeoff roll, the aircraft reached approximately 625 feet when its transponder ceased functioning. But the plane hadn't crashed yet. The transponder may have failed due to an electric malfunction. Maybe that's why flight radar couldn't track the plane after 625 feet. But what caused the aircraft to experience a sudden loss of lift? The answer is in the transponder data. All electronic systems rely on electrical power. If the plane loses electrical power, the transponder will shut off. The aircraft's electrical system is primarily generated by its engines. Could an engine malfunction have contributed to the issue? In such scenarios, the aircraft's electrical power supply may fail. That's probably why the plane's transponder went off, or maybe there was some kind of electrical failure. Even with an electrical failure, the aircraft would not plummet directly to the ground. Footage shows the aircraft descending gradually, typically indicative of insufficient engine thrust. In the video footage, an object protrudes from the aircraft, possibly the ram air turbine. The ram air turbine automatically deploys in the event of a dual engine failure. Following a dual engine failure, the aircraft's primary electrical supply is interrupted. This may have been when the aircraft's transponders ceased functioning at approximately 625 feet altitude. When the power supply cuts off, the ram air turbine deploys and spins like a windmill to generate electricity. But it's not enough to power the whole plane. Maybe at that moment the passengers saw some flashing lights. However, the video footage doesn't clearly show whether the ram air turbine actually deployed or not. There's one more thing to notice here: the plane's landing gear. The landing gear appeared partially extended, likely due to a hydraulic failure. Hydraulic systems, which operate the landing gear, depend on engine-driven electrical power. It's possible the pilot tried to retract the landing gear right after takeoff, but because of the electrical failure, it didn't fully close and got stuck forward. Keeping all this in mind, we can say problems would have started even before takeoff, maybe due to engine failure. The ATC reported that the pilot made a mayday call. A mayday call is issued when the aircraft faces a critical emergency that may lead to a crash. When the pilot made the call, the plane must have still close to the end of the runway. A question arises: if the pilot recognized the risk of a crash during the takeoff roll, why did they continue the flight? Why didn't they apply brakes and stop the plane? The simple answer is the plane's speed was already too high to stop. During the takeoff roll, the aircraft reaches V1 speed, the maximum speed at which pilot can safely abort takeoff using brakes. V1 is the last moment to decide whether to stop or take off. After surpassing V1, the aircraft reaches VR speed, the rotation speed for takeoff. At VR, the nose of the plane slowly lifts off the runway. After crossing VR speed, it moves towards V2, the speed at which it's impossible to stop the plane anymore, because brakes only work if the plane's wheels are touching the ground. Once the plane is flying, brakes don't work. If even one engine fails between VR and V2 speeds, the plane can't take off because one engine can't generate enough power to reach V2 speed. V2 is the speed that lets a plane fly even with one engine working. But if the engine fails before reaching V2, the pilot can neither stop nor get the plane airborne. A crash becomes inevitable. It is hypothesized that around VR speed, during rotation, one or both engines likely failed. That's probably when the pilot couldn't apply brakes either. The plane reached an altitude of 625 feet, but sadly in the next 10 seconds, it was going to crash. We can see that just before crashing, the plane's nose was tilted slightly upward. Here, the pilot was making a last effort to steer the plane farther, trying to avoid the densely populated area. So far, there's no sign that pilot error was involved, though ATBS data shows the plane took off roughly from middle of the runway. Whether that data is accurate or not is yet to be confirmed. This accident stunned the global community and prompted significant concerns about Air India's safety standards. Following this accident, multiple safety incidents were reported on other Air India flights. On a flight from Hong Kong to Delhi, Air India faced a similar issue mid-air. This too was a Boeing 787 with over 200 passengers. The pilot chose not to continue the flight and landed back safely in Hong Kong due to technical problems. This incident occurred on June 16, 2025. Last year, on May 14, 2024, two senior Air India flight attendants wrote a letter to Indian Prime Minister saying that they were fired because they gave a statement that the airline didn't like and was asked to change, but they refused. The issue is that a technical problem happened with the Boeing 787's door. It was on the Dreamliner plane. When they opened the door manually, the sliding raft deployed. But the raft is only supposed to deploy if opened in arm or automatic mode, not manual. Air India apparently didn't like this statement and told them to change it. When they didn't, they got fired. That's what the two flight attendants said, and the Times of India published this 8 days after the accident. 10 days after the crash, Air India posted on X saying that they were grounding a lot of their planes. After reading all this, questions arises in mind. Why are these safety issues only coming up after the crash? Were pilots ignoring minor safety problems before? And this accident just opened everyone's eyes. Who doesn't fear death? Just 2 days after the crash, a pilot had a panic attack because of the fear and refused to fly. Another pilot then completed the flight, though this isn't officially confirmed. An Air India pilot shared that on the day Air India crashed, we have to fly on same day and they were going through a lot of stress. They kept getting calls from families asking if they were alive. Reviewing these reports raises the question, How safe is air travel with Air India? Why are the airline companies facing so many technical problems? We'll probably get answers soon after the investigation of Air India 171. At present, the investigation is ongoing and the team is looking into a different crash, an accident involving Titan Airline A321, where the engine stalled. The problem here was fuel contamination. In simple terms, fuel contamination occurs when impurities enter the aircraft's wing-mounted fuel tanks, which supply fuel to the engines. The wing-mounted fuel tanks supply fuel to their respective engines. Fuel can come contaminated with impurities such as water or particulate matter. A fuel filter prevents contaminants from reaching the engine and requires periodic replacement. If not replaced, the filter may clog, restricting fuel flow to the engine and reducing thrust output. The investigation report noted that the aircraft's right engine was replaced in March 2025, with the left engine scheduled for maintenance in December 2025. Both engines underwent maintenance in 2023 and had an unremarkable service record. If fuel contamination occurred, it would likely indicate a maintenance oversight. Considering the takeoff distance, the aircraft initiated its roll near the runway's end, suggesting any fuel contamination may have manifested during the takeoff phase. Having exceeded VR speed, aborting the takeoff was no longer feasible. However, unresolved questions remain, such as why the ram air turbine deployed. The ram air turbine typically deploys only in the event of a dual engine failure. If fuel contamination caused an engine failure, only one engine should have been affected, as the other, replaced in March 2025, was relatively new. If one engine remained operational, the ram air turbine should not have been deployed. Regarding Titan Airways, an accident occurred in February 26, 2020. The aircraft, an Airbus A321, departed from Gatwick Airport, and shortly after takeoff, one engine stalled, resulting in a loss of thrust and lift. By that point, the aircraft had sufficient speed and altitude to remain airborne, enabling a safe landing 11 minutes later. There were no injuries reported. This incident shows similarities to Air India Flight 171, but the Air India's engine lost thrust more rapidly, leading to the crash. The Titan Airways engine lost thrust gradually, allowing the aircraft to maintain sufficient lift and remain airborne. The critical question is whether a similar issue contributed to Air India's accident. The preliminary investigation report is anticipated shortly, which will reveal the findings of the investigation team. That's all for this video so far. If you liked the video, give it a like. If not, feel free to dislike. Either way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more informative content. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep watching and keep learning.